Behind me is a 2023 Nissan Armada Platinum four-wheel drive. Now you're probably asking, haven't we already seen this on the channel not even 2 years ago? You would be correct, but this is actually my first press car as a new resident of Michigan, so I took what they gave me and it just happened to be the same spec as that car. So if you want to see a more in-depth review, go ahead to Alex's video. But for now, because it is also a brisk and snowy winter day here in Michigan, I'm gonna make this a pretty quick review. So come on, let's go. Under the hood is a 5.6 liter V8 putting out 400 horsepower, 413 pound-feet of torque, and the EPA says it should only get about 15 miles per gallon combined with four-wheel drive. I've been seeing closer to 17. All right, hopping into the driver's seat of the Armada, the first thing you notice is this feeling that comes over your body that's telling you that there's gotta be a V8 under that hood, and you are correct. I'm not sure if the reason I'm feeling that way immediately is because it's so old in here. Now, this right here in the middle is a little bit newer. This was refreshed for 2021. We have a much more modern look. Also, Mazda-like, we have this rotary controller down here for in situations when you have gloves on and it's cold outside and you can't touch the touchscreen. I really like having both options. There's one area where I think Nissan is doing a much better job than Toyota did keeping its large SUV fresh when it was going through its last generation. Now, of course, the Sequoia has been redesigned fully, finally, but the Armada here is getting just as old. It dates back to 2010 if you think about the original QX56 that we got here, and of course the Patrol overseas, but I digress. This interior could use a modernization in other ways, like the fact that, of course, we still have a small LCD instrument cluster that's not very customizable, if at all. The steering wheel is an older Nissan design. I would love to see the newer steering wheel we're seeing in other models in the lineup. And then the rest of this faux wood treatment, it looks nice and I like the coloring of it, but it looks like somebody put a Krispy Kreme donut glaze over it. So it just doesn't look very real to me. If you want a nicer interior than this, but a very similar feel otherwise, of course, you have the Infiniti QX80. Keep in mind that both models do offer Apple CarPlay and Android Auto to some effect. So if you're not going to be using the onboard infotainment system most of the time, then don't worry about that. Other ways that it's kind of old school in here, the fact that we have a standard size moonroof above my head here. These seats feel more like postmodern art pieces than actual sitting furniture. Second row space is perfectly fine for this category. We have a nice and large center console here with cup holders and storage, including two headrests for the entertainment centers that are located here in the headrests. Because we don't have a panoramic moonroof or anything back here, it's pretty dark in this headliner. This is not a suede headliner, it's just a basic headliner. We also have secret storage right here in the front center console. It opens in the reverse direction to allow access from the rear. Then down below here we have the automatic climate controls for this third zone of the tri-zone climate control, and then we have your outboard captain's chair's heated seat functions. These seats, even in the top trim, are not ventilated, only heated. Both the driver and the front passenger have pockets in their seat backs right here, and these captain's chairs do recline. They don't go back as far as some other seats that I've experienced, and there is a pressure point that forms in the lower back area once you're like this, but be appreciative that they recline in the first place. Accessing the third row is pretty quick and simple, but unlike Nissan's newer products, you cannot leave a child seat in position and move this seat forward because it does what you're about to see, a little tumbling action. So by either pulling this lever here or pulling this one here, the seat then tumbles forward and then you have to climb up a pretty decent hike up to get into the third row. And once you're back here, honestly, it's not the biggest third row in the world. This would feel pretty familiar if you've been in the last generation Toyota Land Cruiser, but this is a little bit better than what you get in the new Toyota Sequoia because of that hybrid battery right below the seat. So this is not the best, but it's not the worst. Headroom is pretty decent. I would say I have 3 to 4 inches of headroom left, so that is pretty good. But knee room and foot room are pretty limited. The floor is pretty high. So a lot of things to keep in mind. This is a kids only seat area. I would say if you want to put 3 kids back here, they'll be just fine, but 2 adults at the max. On this Platinum trim, we do have power folding third row seats. That allows you to fold them into the floor for storage, or from the back seat area here, you can recline the seat bag itself to give it a more relaxed position. Getting back into the cargo space of the Armada, with all the seats up, you only have about 16.5 cubic feet of space. That is smaller than most of the competitors, and even smaller than what you'll find in the new Honda Pilot. But don't forget, this is a very old platform, a body-on-frame SUV, so cargo space was not exactly maximized back when this first came out, but you would hope for a next generation that there would be better use of the interior space. There is a tiny bit of storage under the floor there, but it's so minuscule you can only fit maybe a couple of magazines or thinner items like that. And luckily we have a tow hitch back here if you want to tow up to 8,500 pounds, and under all of that, a spare tire. So in case you all haven't seen it before, this is rural Michigan in the winter when it has snowed. It's quite pretty, isn't it? Getting the Armada out on the road is like stepping back in time. Unlike that Grand Wagoneer I had earlier this year, which is obviously a much more modern vehicle, this had a sort of old school swagger to it that I think a lot of people are missing out on. All of these new crossovers with the unibody construction and the independent rear suspensions, they definitely are comfortable and nice for families, but there are a select few people out there, especially those in the suburbs and in the rural parts of the country, that actually prefer the towing capability and the large burly feel of this type of experience. And pretty much the Armada is the only one left that's just like this. Either everyone else has gone independent rear suspension, or like in Toyota's case, hybrid only, or twin turbo V6 only. All of these things have been changing across the large SUV category, and the Nissan Armada is the last one to stick true to the roots of this segment. And I think that will allow it to appeal to a pretty specific buyer, but a buyer that exists nonetheless. But going through these nice and smooth curves in the countryside, the car really does feel comfortable and smooth, but go through any sort of imperfections in the pavement and you will feel the undulations, you will crash over certain rough bumps, all of the things you expect to happen from a non-independent rear suspension based vehicle that is this high off the ground would do. So don't go into this expecting it to be very agile. Consider the Armada an old racing horse. This used to be a very popular type of vehicle, but it really needs those open pastures, open green spaces, long streets of straight and slightly curved roads. That's where this car thrives, which is why the highway is also where it thrives, because that shares a very similar dynamic to what I just described. But getting this car out on a road like this is where your passengers are going to feel safe, you as a driver are going to feel safe, and everyone else is going to have a comfortable ride. One area where I find the Armada is actually superior to the Sequoia is actually in its brake feel. These brakes are very, very good. They make this car feel a lot lighter than it actually is, and they're smooth and linear when you push them. They're never, asking for you to stomp on them in order to get the car to stop. But this is still a heavy vehicle, even though it might not feel like it from the pedals. This is going to take around 130 feet to stop from 60 miles an hour. So keep that in mind. But the brakes around town when you're not going that fast will feel nice and easy. And even though this is an old V8, like I said earlier, it has been beefed up a little bit over the years with that 413 pound-feet of torque in a very low first gear from the 7-speed. This actually feels very, very peppy off the line. 0 to 60 miles per hour takes just over 6 seconds. So this thing is pretty fast and it sounds great doing it. If you don't like the switch to turbocharged 6-cylinder engines or hybridized turbocharged 6-cylinder engines, then you're going to want to stick with the Armada. Though, of course, there is a 5.3-liter V8 available in some of the GM options. Those are not going to be as fast as this, but they might be just as inefficient fuel economy wise. I have been averaging about 17 miles per gallon in this, but that's actually a little bit better than what the EPA expects me to get. So as always, your mileage may vary. So what to say about the Nissan Armada? Well, let's summarize it with the positives first. It has an imposing design that I think has aged quite nicely over the years and was even better looking after the refresh. It just looks very modern and looks clean, even though it is an older car. It also has a powerful V8 that will most certainly not make it to the next generation if that is happening. It's definitely torquey, it definitely has that old school feel, and as I'll talk about in a second, it has its drawbacks. The Armada is also a great value. As you're about to see, it has the lowest starting price in the segment and pretty much tops off way below what everybody else does. That's mainly to do with its age and the fact that it just doesn't have all the modern features and engineering feats underneath the skin, so that makes sense. But we'll have to see how they churn things out for the next generation if one is coming. And a couple years ago for that refresh, they also gave it a nice interior upgrade with good interior tech, large screen, buttons still in the dashboard, so we're not full screen yet. There is a mixture there. It really freshens up the experience when you have technology on the inside that actually matches what your current lifestyle is doing, even though you want that maybe old school vibe behind the wheel. The third row is definitely not the biggest in the segment, but it's not the smallest either. That award goes to the new Toyota Sequoia. And also, the dynamics of the car are pretty old school, as I just kind of touched on. And that leads to the last thing, which is the fuel economy. If you are looking for something with more than 20 miles per gallon, this should not be on your list at all. There are hybrid options in the segment, there are diesel options in the segment, and there are big V8 options in this segment that get better fuel economy than the Armada. But pricing, this is exciting. So the base price of an Armada is actually $52,095, but it only taps out at 20 grand more, $72,560, and you're getting a lot of features for the money. But There are some options here that will go beyond that price point. They already start at a little bit higher of a number, but they will go way close to $100,000. Like that Jeep Wagoneer, which is an interesting segment buster because it's got the Wagoneer version and the Grand Wagoneer version, but it's also got the L versions of both of those. It's got a new twin-turbo inline-6 engine available. That is the most modern option here, even though the Toyota Sequoia technically came out afterwards. It just doesn't have the same kind of sophistication. I think it does feel a little bit less refined because of that standard hybrid powertrain. Some people think otherwise. I'm just telling you how I feel about it. So long story short, the Japanese really need to step up their game when it comes to large three-row SUVs, but I think Nissan has a good chance of doing so with its next generation of the Patrol / Armada / Infiniti QX80. It's just a matter of whether we'll see them come to the United States. In the meantime, if you're looking forward to more of our typical long format content, the detailed car reviews that we are so good at, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell icon to get notified, and like this video if you are a fan of that old school body on frame SUV feel. I know there are a lot of people out there that do, and they are missing out on it. They wish it was still around, and the Armada is that relic of the past that you still can buy today in 2023. Also, make sure to follow us on all of our social media channels and go to the Alex on Auto's website for all the written reviews if that's the way you prefer to take in your car reviews. And finally, as always, thank you so much for your view, and we will see you on the next one.